say the game is getting old. Monday morning and your coffee's cold. Life is not what you want it to be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. My name is Jay Izzo, and oh my gosh, do we have a great show. I am telling you what, today is one of those life-changing shows that if, I don't care who you are, all right? This is a life changer. This isn't just a game changer. This is the changer of your life. It is a show. I don't care who you are, somewhere. I have friends somewhere out there, many of you who have had parents who have been alcoholics. Some of you are a recovering alcoholic. Some of you are alcoholics. Some of you have been abused by the abuser. Some of you have been verbally abused, physically abused. Listen, there is things called not just alcohol abuse, there is spiritual abuse. There is so many abuses out there. And you know what? I would be doing a disservice to everybody out there if I don't do this show. And I'm going to tell you something. Jason Romano, yes, that Jason Romano. ESPN former producer Jason Romano, Monday Night Football, game night. Oh, come on. Yeah, he's joining us today. And I'm going to tell you something. He's going to blow your mind with your story. It's absolutely fantastic. You're going to love it. And the book is called Live to Forgive. Moving forward when those we love hurt us. Man, what a great book. I've read it several times. I've shared it with people. It is absolutely phenomenal. And here's what we're going to do, though. You know what? We're going to do what we do every week, right? And you know what that is, right? Every week, before we get to Jason, I walk you through the 4 areas of your life. And last week, I talked about, how are you training in the 4 areas of your life? We are 4-part people. We are physical people, we are mental people, we are emotional people, and we are spiritual people. And we're only as good as our training is. That's it, right? If we talk about physical training, right? And I'm a guy who loves to physically train, but here's the deal. You've got to be mentally training every day, you've got to be emotionally training every day, and you've got to be spiritually training every single day. Because if you're in the middle of battle, if you're in the middle of the heat, if you're in the middle of stress, if you are in the middle of heated stress where you're getting pounded on, you're only as good as your training. That's it. So I'm going to ask you all out there on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being my training stinks to 10, my training is unbelievable. How well are you doing physically on that scale of 1 to 10? Right? Listen, there's a lot of excuses we can make, but we all have to take 100% responsibility for who we are, right? The fact of the matter is, just because the gyms aren't open doesn't mean that you can't train. It doesn't mean that you can't work out. It doesn't mean that you can't eat right. It doesn't mean that you can't drink enough water. It doesn't mean that you can't get enough sleep. It doesn't mean that you can't do all the things that you need to do to take care of your body, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing in your training? And then I want to ask you this. What can you do right now to change it? Because you can't wait. When you're in battle to change that, you got to start now. So what are you going to do right now to change your training physically? All right. So there, you got a first number, right? That's your physical number. Second number, mentally. What do I mean by that? How well are you training your mind? What are you reading? What are you consuming? What are you putting into your mind that's helping you grow in wisdom and understanding and knowledge? What are you reading? I'm not talking about what you're listening to. Right? I mean, and listen, I think listening to books are great. But what I'm talking about is what are you consuming in your brain that's actually helping you grow into a better thinking person, right? And how's that training going? Because you got to push yourself. You got to push your mind in the same way you got to push your body. You have to be able to push your mind. You have to read the tough things. You have to read hard things. You know what? I got to tell you something. Live to Forgive. Maybe a hard book for you to read. Do you remember what happened last week? We talked to Green Beret, Major Jason Van Camp last week. Do you remember what he said? You got to embrace the discomfort. That very thing that you don't want to do, that's the thing you got to be doing. And so I would really, a book like Live to Forgive is a great book to challenge you, to challenge the way you think. So you got two numbers, a physical number, a mental number. And then the emotional number. Jason talked about in his book, he's going to talk about this today, a lot of emotional things that he had to deal with and how he struggled along the way, coming to grips with his own emotions with his dad. Because there was a period of time there where, he didn't know where he was at emotionally. His emotions swung from, I wish my dad was gone, to, I want my dad to live, to, I want to have a relationship with my dad. That's man, that whole characteristic that Jason's going to talk with us today, that's what we call emotional intelligence. That's emotional growth. That's an emotional challenge. And whatever you're facing today emotionally, right, you have to look at those things as part of your emotional challenge. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your emotional training coming? And it reflects two things. One is how well are you able to control your emotions? And then two, how well are you able to actually tap into the emotions of other people and understand those emotions, have empathy, and have compassion. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1, I'm not very good at that, 10, I'm outstanding. Where would you put yourself? So you have 3 numbers, which leads us to the 4th area, and that's the spiritual area. And listen, spiritual area is really pretty easy for me to just help you understand. Here's what it works. If you remove the physical, mental, and emotional, and you remove all that, whatever you have left, that's the spiritual piece. I thought it was interesting. I read recently about the spiritual area. We all have a spirit inside of us. You'll hear people talk about, that we've got the spirit that lives inside of us, that drives us, or that connects us peacefully, or connects us with joy. And I didn't say happiness, I said joy. So you got to know the difference. And peace. And I heard and I read this. It said, you know what? Being spiritual is not going to church and thinking about kayaking. Being spiritual is going kayaking and thinking about God. That's being spiritual. So whatever that is for you, how is your training going spiritually? I have some people who say it's meditation. I have some people who say it's nature. And then I have people who do say it's God. How is it working for you? How's the training going on a scale of 1 to 10? By the way, you've got 4 numbers, right? You think of those 4 numbers as the legs of a chair. If the chair is uneven, it's bad on your posture, and it's hard to get settled. And it's hard to sit. By the same token, if the chair is too low, what happens is we can't eat at a normal table. So the whole idea is to bring up all 4 areas of your life. Bring them up in balance. And then not only bring them up in balance, but bring them to the right level, at your highest level. Start your training today. Start it now. What can you do? What can you change? Speaking of somebody who loves talking about change, his name is Jason Romano. Jason is a speaker, author, media consultant, church leader with 20 years of professional broadcasting experience on the regional and network level. For 17 years, Jason was a senior manager and producer at ESPN. He has created and produced content for shows such as SportsCenter. May have heard of that. Monday Night Football. May have heard of that. Mike and Mike in the Morning. We all have heard of that. Sunday NFL Countdown. Come on, man. You had to have heard of that. How about College Game Day, MLB's All-Star Game? And you know what? During his time at ESPN, Jason produced content for ESPN's radio, which he loved. And you know what? He grew the talent, producing department, building relationships with some of the biggest names in sports, as well as create and manage the NFL on ESPN social media channels, growing them to over 6 million followers. Jason has spoken to thousands of people at conferences, colleges, companies, and churches. He's a big advocate of social media, having built up such a huge following with ESPN and his own personal social feeds, as well as his own personal brand. Listen, he is so easy to reach out. You can reach out to him, but he's absolutely an outstanding guy. He is the author of this book, and he's got a brand new book coming out also called Uniform of Leadership. But we're going to talk today about Live to Forgive. So everybody out there, please welcome to A New Direction and welcome to the show, Jason Romano. Welcome, brother.
Jay, thank you, buddy. So good to be with you. That was quite the introduction. I appreciate it, my friend.
You are so welcome. So, listen, this book, this book, Live to Forgive. I have written you. I have told you I'm a big fan. The book broke me down. I'm going to be really be honest about that. There was a point, I dictate the book out loud when I do the notes of the book. Mm-hmm. And there's a point where I'm dictating the book out loud because my typing, quite frankly, is slower than my dictation. And I'm reading these things out loud. and I'm finding tears rolling down my eyes. And then, of course, what you do is you have to go ahead and poke me right in the chest and go, so what's hurting inside you, big fella? And I'm like going, wow, I wasn't ready for that. But it is a great book. It is a book.
Thank you.
That I believe it touches people. This book is really a book about you and your father and the relationship between you and your dad, and actually you and the bottle. Can we say that?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Right? So let's just start where it all starts in chapter 1. It's called Finding Your Father's Secret, The Importance of Feeling. And it starts, you're all excited, summer 1984, Dad takes you to Ticketmaster. It's the Giants versus the Eagles. Of course, Dad's a Giants fan, you're an Eagles fan. What happened?
Well, I'll preface it by saying I'm not an Eagles fan. My brother is actually the Eagles fan, and he would yell at me.
You're a Cowboys guy. You're a Cowboys guy.
I am a Cowboys guy. So if I just rolled off the tongue and be like, "Yep, I'm an Eagles fan," my brother would come after me right now because he's an Eagles fan. Imagine that household: Eagles, Cowboys, Giants. It was quite the household growing up.
You were missing the Redskins in that household.
I know. It's the only team we're missing. It's crazy. But as a kid, I really didn't care. I mean, I would love to have seen Dallas, but you take a kid to a game, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And when it was Eagles and Giants, and it was my brother's team and my dad's team, I was so excited, all ready to go. I was 10, 11 years old. We're talking about the fall of '84 here. And it was my first game. And I remember vividly, as I was writing the book, too, the memories start coming back of driving down to Philadelphia from Albany, New York, where I'm from, and the anticipation and the excitement and having that ticket, which was so hard to get. Football tickets were not easy to get. They aren't easy today. And back then it was hard too. And getting to park in the parking lot where all the fans are and then walking in, and that long walk from the parking lot to the stadium, the old veteran stadium in Philadelphia. And you go inside, and all of a sudden, all you see is a sea of green, not just green in terms of the fans, but like the giant amounts of green on the turf and the football field. It's just insanely big. And it was amazing. I mean, it's everything you want to remember as far as an experience as a kid to go to their first football game. But quickly, and maybe you want me to just go here, maybe you don't, you can kind of take me there if you want. Quickly, that turned from excitement to confusion to fear, and ultimately to tears and a very scary drive back, unfortunately.
You know, what happened, though, was this is your first experience, though, with, seeing your dad drink.
And understanding it, yes. Yeah. I mean, I've been around him drinking before, didn't know that it was going to lead to bad circumstances or terrible outcomes. You know, I remember being 6 years old and going, Jay, to the bar with my dad, and he would give me some quarters and buy me a soda, and I would go play pinball. And that wasn't a bad experience for me, even though my dad was drinking and probably, drinking too much. But it was at this moment when I saw him drinking, and it was affecting me, it was affecting everyone around him. And that was where it got really scary. That's why I talk about the secret, finding out your dad's secret, because the secret wasn't that he drank. The secret was that he had a drinking problem, and that it was affecting and causing a lot of people pain, including himself.
But the one thing that you describe in this, though, is that his personality changed.
Yes. Jekyll and Hyde. So my dad, if you met my dad today, and even if you met him back then and he was sober, very charming guy, nice guy, a lot of fun, loves to laugh, huge sports fan. But once he drank, he turned into a different person, and he became, and sports usually was revolved around his drinking, unfortunately. So that's where I equate sports, my dad, and his alcoholism almost together as one. And when he drank, he turned into a monster, like a real angry, screaming, yelling, verbally abusive, never physically abusive, but verbally abusive, and saying things that, as I got older, certainly into my 20s and 30s, and things I heard from him when he was drinking, I could never repeat to my worst enemy. Like, they were horrible things. So that's what happened. And that was the first time I remember seeing my dad turn into a different person. And it was a scary, scary moment for me, for my brothers, for my stepmother. I mean, it was pretty scary.
So, one of the things you say in that day is that was the day that should have brought us all closer together, but instead it helped create instability and insecurity in me and my brother's psyches.
Yeah.
And, but the key for you was your love of sports was the very thing that was actually kind of tearing it all apart.
Yeah, I say the very thing that should have brought us together actually breaks us and separated us and tore us apart, because sports was and honestly still to this day, Jay, sports is the common denominator with my relationship with my father. The last few months without sports in the middle of the pandemic, we have had to try and figure out other things to talk about. But that always, even in the midst of our relationship, as we started to reconcile, and I know we'll get to that, we still talk about sports. So the very thing that should have brought us together, and in many ways did when we were little, just tore us apart, because the only time I would see my dad in the state he was in usually revolved around sports. Like, we would go and watch games on Sunday and be excited to sit there and watch a football game with him or a baseball game. And if he was drinking, it usually ended up in a really bad experience, that somebody was going to be crying, other people are going to be walking out of the room, and he was going to be playing the victim role of, why are you all upset at me? I didn't do anything. And it was just it should have been a good memory, and it just wasn't.
Yet you do have kind of this, fortunately for you, you have this kind of this rock behind you, and that's Nana and Pa, your grandma and grandfather. They were kind of like this center rock during all the turmoil, right, that you could kind of hold on to. So describe, how you gravitated, because here your dad was all over the place, and yet your grandmother and grandfather were kind of where you were able to kind of have some stability, right?
Yeah. So I want to give a shout out to my mom too, because she's a rock as well. But my mom was working 3 jobs when we were little just to keep food on the table, because my dad was nowhere to be found, or if he was, it wasn't in a good place. So my grandparents were the ones that my mom entrusted us to go to, and kind of, they would watch us and take care of us and take us to the movies on the weekends, and to restaurants, and to sporting events, and to the store as kids, and get all the toys we wanted. They spoiled the heck out of us. And me and my 2 brothers, are their only 3 grandchildren that they had. So they had 1 child, my dad. And so those 3 grandchildren, for them, it's like their second, third, and fourth children. And we didn't appreciate that when we were little, because we were just happy that somebody wanted to buy stuff for us and take us to go get food and all that. But as we got older, certainly we appreciated all that they sacrificed in their later years to take care of us, to get us whatever we wanted. I mean, when I went to college, my grandfather paid basically for my first semester of college, first year of college. So they were more generous than any 2 people I've ever known, and not just generous with purchasing and buying, but with their time. And I think they saw their son, my dad, heading down a really bad path. And so they felt responsible that my dad wasn't there for us. So they felt responsible to pick up the slack. And they picked up the slack quite a bit. I'm grateful for them. They're they're 2 of my favorite people ever. My grandfather is my hero, the greatest man I've ever known. And we miss them, but I remember clearly all those times that they took care of us. And, I don't think we would be here and be the people we are, my brothers and I, without them.
We're talking with Jason Romano. The book is called Live to Forgive, Moving Forward When Those we love hurt us. And the book is an outstanding read. You need to pick it up. I'm just telling you, it's, if not for yourself, do it for a friend. so that you can learn more about really the struggles that so many people go through, so many of us go through when we're dealing with people, abusive situations. It's going to really give you a lot of insight, I promise you. One of the things that you said is Dad's alcoholism pulled me deeper into two realities. You said an external reality, the unresolved issues in my dad's life and the problems they caused for those he loved, which I couldn't control. And then an internal reality, the unresolved issues in my own life and the problems they were causing for me, which I could begin to acknowledge and work through. Talk about those two realities.
Yeah, I think I would even add a third reality, which wasn't in the book, but the reality of my mom and my grandparents, but my mom allowing us to have a normal childhood and experience things, right? And my grandmother too, and grandfather, just taking us to the movies, taking us to the toy store, taking us to dinner. Like those are just normal things that kids get to do. Going out and playing with your friends, going in the backyard of my grandparents' house and having epic basketball battles with my brothers. That was the sort of regular reality that I remember as of the good side of growing up as a kid. And then there was the dad reality, which was the bad side of the sort of life that we were living. But the internal reality, that didn't really take shape until I recognized 14, 15, 16, and we can all go back to those years as teenagers. And as we're starting to mature and get a little older and start to understand things differently than when we were little kids, that's when I tell people all the time, my relationship with my dad during those years was very confusing. And it's the first time I tell the story in the book of getting ready to go to a Mets game with him. I'm a Mets fan. He's a Cardinals fan. And we were going to take a bus trip down. This is probably when I was 14 or 15. And, we were getting ready to go and he shows up drunk. And the night before, so it wasn't even the morning of, and I had such anger towards him. It's the first time I really lashed out at him and for myself played the victim and said, how could you do this to me? How could you let me down? We have a game to go to here. This was supposed to be our moment, our time together, just you and me. And you come home drunk. And I remember hiding myself and going into the bathroom, locking the door, and just kind of creating this barrier that needed to be created for me right there at that moment with my father. And I was screaming and yelling and crying, which very rarely did I ever cry in terms of emotions for anything during those years. And I was crying, so upset. And, 14, 15, 16-year-olds are pretty selfish kids, selfish people, just in general. And I'm sure a lot of that had to do with me being selfish and wanting to have this experience to go to a Mets game. But deep down, this reality, as you talked about, going on inside of me was a crushed kid who just wanted to have his dad be for him for once in his life. And remember, I had two brothers, so most of what we did was all together. And this was a moment where it was just going to be me and my father, and it was ruined. And I think that's kind of the internal struggle that I battled with and tried to understand and was very confused over for many years during my teenage time, that 13 to 17 range.
His name's Jason Romano. The book's called Live to Forgive, Moving Forward When Those We Love Hurt Us. And you're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, New Direction has a couple sponsors, right? And we love our sponsors. And, Epic Physical Therapy is one of our favorite sponsors. And whether you're recovering from an injury or surgery, or maybe you're suffering everyday aches and pains, maybe you're having difficulty performing activities of daily living or unable to perform an athletic activity because you're a professional athlete or you're a high school athlete or a junior high athlete. Look, even if you're just looking to improve how you move and feel, the elite team at Epic Physical Therapy will provide you with a customized treatment plan tailored to you, period. With their experience in rehabbing young athletes to elite professional athletes, they really do understand the need to treat the entire body as a functional whole, not just your symptoms or your injury. So if you're ready for epic relief, epic recovery, and epic results, do not look any further. Just go to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And of course, Linda Craft and Team Realtors. No matter where you're at in the United States or in the world, Linda Craft and her team will help you find the best professional to sell your home or buy your next home. Why can they do that? Well, they're independently owned and operated, meaning they don't belong to any national company. So what they have done is over the course of the last 35 years, they have developed relationships with the best real estate professionals all over the world, which means that they can hook you up with the best professional to help you do what you want to do when it comes to your dreams of home ownership. So here's the thing. For 35 years, their clients keep coming back. And you know what they call them? They call them the legends of customer service. Yep, their customer service is legendary. I didn't say it. They didn't say it. That's what their clients say. So if you're ready for the legends of customer service, why not check out the folks at Linda Craft and team, right? And you can learn more by going to lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Jason Romano and his book, Live to Forgive. And we're just barely in the first chapter.
Right.
But we're gonna move ahead. We're gonna speed his life up. He's probably looking at me going, I don't speed my life up anymore, man. I want it to slow down, right?
It's all good, man.
So, you know, what's interesting about when we last left you, you were huddled on the bathroom floor. And that barrier that you talk about will become a theme actually throughout the entire book, because it is the importance of setting a boundary. And you know, one of the things as a psychological professional, I love, you know, when you start unfolding people's stories and you go, wow, how cool is that you had a foreshadowing of hiding yourself in a bathroom with a door, setting up a boundary, making the wall the physical wall your boundary, and then having to learn how to set up your own emotional and mental boundaries down the road. And
yeah, it's funny that's how that worked out. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I found it. I was like going, I wonder if he put that together, that this was a foreshadowing of, you know, because you do talk a lot about boundaries, because Dad, as you start to get older, Dad starts crossing boundaries for you.
Yes.
And you find different bathrooms to hide in, is what you do. I mean, I have no other. I mean, it's just the analogy just works, right? Because what happens is, right? Because Dad has a way of hurting you, right? Because it's your high school graduation, right? Let's move there. It's your high school graduation. Yeah. Your stepmom's there, but who wasn't there?
My dad. And it's funny, you know, I tell people the 4 pillars of a person's life are those moments that you always refer back to, right? So you start with high school graduation, you go to college graduation, you go to your wedding day, and then for me, it was when my daughter was born. So those are my 4 pillar moments, right? And you could throw other things in there, certainly ESPN and things like that. But those 4 moments are probably the ones that most people would look at and say, well, it's when I graduated high school, graduated college, got married, and had a kid. Like those set your life up in the trajectory you're going to go in. All 4 of those moments, my dad was absent or missing. And there were times where he was trying to get better. In that high school graduation that you brought up, Jay, my dad was in a rehab for the very first time trying to get sober. And so that was 1991. That's almost 30 years ago now. And he was trying to get better. But I didn't see it as him trying to get better. I saw it as him missing my graduation day. And I needed my dad to be at my graduation, right? And so college, same thing. I needed my dad to be there for me in college. He was, you know, not there. I don't remember if he was in a rehab or if he was just having a drinking spell. I certainly remember my wedding day 20 years ago in 1999, 21 years ago, when we wanted him there. We were even inviting him to the wedding, and then we had to uninvite him to the wedding. But I wanted my dad at my wedding. I mean, you only hopefully get married once, and that's when I wanted him to be there and experience that. And he went on a drinking binge 4 or 5 days before the wedding. We had to uninvite my dad from my wedding. And then lastly, when my daughter was born, 2004, we were at the hospital, and my dad was at his own hospital out in Utica, New York, which is probably 3 hours from where I was in Connecticut at the time. And he was in a rehab trying to get better, but missing the birth of our daughter. And not to take away anything from my brother having kids, and they both have 4 kids and have 8 kids, and it's amazing. But we went through 4 years of infertility, and this was a big deal. This was a gigantic deal. It's always a big deal. But for us, this was a miracle about to happen because we prayed and prayed for this child. And so you want your dad there, and he wasn't. And everybody else was. My wife's parents were there. My wife's sister was there. My mom was there. My brothers were all there. They all drove out to be there for us in our big moment. And my dad wasn't. And so that was kind of this recurring theme. Started through high school, and basically 13, 14 years later continued when I became a father myself.
You make a statement in this book that I want to throw out at you. You say anger and hatred are okay, but they must be moved through. And I'm just going to follow that up with, often it takes an awareness of the brokenness in ourselves to see the brokenness in others and to meet them in their struggles. The fact was, it was embarrassing, humiliating, and made you angry. And you thought your dad was a loser and a drunk.
Yeah. I mean, I had more bitterness inside of me, Jay. And I don't even think I realized it for many years, because there's a point where I had to pivot from my dad and what he had done for me in my life or not done to I have a life to go live myself. And I definitely felt that when I got married, and then when I got the job at ESPN, and then moving to Connecticut and sort of starting this career and this journey and this success, especially from the eyes of the world, seeing me, achieve a job like that. I had a kind of pivot from being sad and feeling sorry for myself and going to live my own life. But deep down, for many, many years, the bitterness just kind of sat there. I talk about in the book about this chapter called Boxes in the Attic. Right.
Love that chapter. I love that chapter. I have stepped over my own boxes and kicked them around a bunch of times. Go ahead.
The idea is that we all have, for the most of us, have this attic, and we throw these things in boxes, and we put them up in the attic, and we store them up there. And sometimes we forget that they're even up there. Sometimes we might not look at them again until we move, or in many cases, till someone passes away, and you start pulling out the memories. For me, I had these boxes of memories from my dad that I had stored and put in the attic of my life, and just said, okay, I'm not going to pull those out anymore. But like I said, when you put something up in the attic in a box, eventually you got to pull it out and open it up and see what's inside. And for me, that's what it was. It was these memories, these feelings, these emotions that I had towards my father, and I just kind of stored them up and put them away. And eventually you got to pull them back out. And usually when my dad would get, drunk or call us, and we would have these really bad phone calls, some of those memories were being pulled out. They weren't good ones. And so I would lash back out at my father. I would scream at him. I would inflict or try to inflict the pain that he was inflicting on me right back to him, which obviously looking back now, very, very unhealthy. And it's not the right way to respond. But being angry, he said, sometimes that's okay. As I wrote, I think it is okay to be angry. In fact, there's 4 parts to the book, and one of them is feeling the pain. Part of the pain is that people inflict on you is allowing yourself to be angry over that. It's what we do once we get angry that can get us in trouble. And for me, my channeling of the anger was to store it in a box and put it in the attic, or to just lash out and scream and yell instead of trying to handle this peacefully or just not handling it all. So I'm not proud of how I responded, to be quite honest with you, because a lot of people might say, Jay, that it was justified because of the pain he caused me, but I'm not proud that I responded that way, especially after I got serious about my faith and understood the faith that I have put my faith and trust in, Christianity. was about forgiveness. And I'm not proud that I really couldn't forgive my dad, even after I understood and started to learn about forgiveness. And I was lashing out, and that wasn't very healthy.
We're talking with Jason Romano. The book's called Live to Forgive, Moving Forward When Those We Love Hurt Us. It's available on Amazon, bookstores near you. Get yourself a copy. Matter of fact, get yourself a number of copies, because this is going to be one of those books that I believe that will help you and help those that you know move through their issues, especially because, you know what, there's a lot of dysfunction out there. It's not just alcohol. There's a lot of, and there's a lot of dysfunction, and this book is going to really be helpful. I'm telling you, just even for me, I found this book to be extraordinarily helpful to reopen my mind to some of the things that I tried to ignore. And it just has been an eye-opener. It's very powerful. So I really recommend, again, it's called Live to Forgive. So our next bathroom moment really is, I should say our next boundary moment is Cayuga Community College. You go to broadcast school because one of the things is that you said going away was vital for my health and growth as a man. And the truth of the matter is you loved broadcasting and you wanted to work in radio, and more specifically, you wanted to work in sports media. And so what was happening was that you go to college, you had a roommate, you were still around some alcohol, and I was, yeah, but you were able to say, I'm not drinking, right? Because this had affected you so much that you said, no, I'm not going to do this. And as a matter of fact, what happens is, and I don't mean for this to sound funny, but you're actually walking down a staircase and some guy randomly punches you, right? Who is drunk, right? And you go back into the party and you break.
I lost it. Yeah. It's funny. I think back to those years, and the pandemic allows you to kind of to think about those old days and rehash them and reminisce a little bit. And I've been doing a lot of that in the last 3-4 months, not just with those times, but just where I was, certainly from a sports perspective and from a journey with my family and all that. But that moment, man, and I wasn't going to put that book initially. And I remember bringing it up. Steve, my co-author, and I were going through it, and he goes, just tell me the story. And so I told him what happened. And in essence, I lived with actually 2 other guys at the time. This is my freshman year of college, so I'm 18. I'm just a young buck alone on his own for the first time, but starting to grow up, starting to understand what it means to live on your own and to be responsible and to go to college and all that. And the house that we lived in, just to be quite honest, was a house that we had a lot of parties. And there was a lot of drinking and other things taking place at these houses at least a couple times a week. And yeah, since I was a kid, I always just didn't want to drink. And so I never had that pressure in high school. And when I went to college, I think I'm so thankful to God that he gave me a desire to not enjoy alcohol. Like, I don't enjoy the taste of it at all. I have tried it and tried it on a couple occasions to try to drink more than just like a sip. And it's just not my thing. So I'm glad for that. And that helped in telling people when I was in college, I don't drink and I'm not going to have any alcohol. But I also started to realize during those years that the more I told people that my dad was an alcoholic, the more of an easy excuse it came to say that, so that people wouldn't question it. If I didn't drink, they might call me a square or call me a dork or whatever, and try to peer pressure me into it. But when I told people about my dad, they stopped right away and they pressure me. So we were there one night. This was late in the school year, probably in April of my freshman year, and we had this house party that was going on pretty late. It was probably after midnight. And there was a guy there. There was a bunch of people there I didn't know. But there was a guy who was coming down the staircase probably from the bathroom. And he comes down the stairs and he looks at me, and I look at him, and I just said, "Hey, what's up, man?" And just trying to be friendly. And he looked at me and thought I must have called him the worst name in the world, because he said, "What did you say?" And I said, "I'm just saying hi." And he goes, "What?" And nails me right in the face. And, I'm not, Jay, I'm a lover, not a fighter, man. I'm not the one who's going to start going down with people. That's just not who I am. And so he hit me, and I was kind of caught off guard. And he just kind of kept walking. There was nobody else around. It was in the sort of foyer area of this house that we were living in. And he hit me, and I was kind of shocked by it. It didn't really hurt. Just kind of scared me, I guess. And I went and walked into the other room, and I was talking to my roommate, Eddie, who's still a great friend of mine, and a couple other guys. And we were just talking, and he goes, "What's wrong?" And I said, "This guy just punched me in the face." And right when I said that, I started bawling. And, 18 years old, and you're around your buddies, and you're at a party. And, for me, I was a dude, I'm like, there's no cry. And I started losing it. But credit to Ed and credit to my other friends. They all went to bat for me. They consoled me. And then they wanted to find the dude who hit me, which was great. I'm like, all right, they're going to bat. We're going to have a knockdown drag out here. And apparently after he hit me, he left. And they couldn't find him. And I found out who it was later. Didn't know him and probably never saw him again after that moment. But it showed me a couple things, Jay. It showed me, I think I cried because, A, I was embarrassed, certainly, that I told the story to someone. B, I think hidden down deep below in the surface of my life was, here we go again with alcohol. And my dad kind of, all that he had done and gone through and pain that he had caused me kind of rearing its ugly head in one moment, just kind of being punched in the face by somebody who had been drinking. And yeah, there was a lot of emotions. And when I told the story to my co-author, Steve, he's like, "We got to put this in the book and let's unpack this." Right. And I said, okay, let's try. That's one of those boxes in the attic memories for sure. We brought it back out.
His name's Jason Romano, and the book's called Live to Forgive, Moving Forward When Those We Love Hurt Us. And you are listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, folks, our sponsors, Epic Physical Therapy, and, of course, Linda Craft and Team Realtors. Listen, I want to talk about Epic Physical Therapy because their facility offers the most advanced, top-of-the-line equipment, including the Ultra-G anti-gravity treadmill, which, by the way, it just takes the pressure off your joints, and you can still run. And I can't speak for your joints, but I can tell you that when it comes to my joints, anything I can get to take pressure off my joints just feels better, all right? That's just the truth, right? They also have the Normatec compression sleeves, the Game Ready, which I tell you every week how much I love. That frozen water compression, just takes all the swelling out. Oh, man, is it awesome. I just love it. That's just a few of the things that they have. Listen, they are trained and certified in the most comprehensive, cutting-edge treatments available, including things like blood flow restriction therapy, dry needling. Oh, man, is that great. And then how about cupping? Have you ever seen the swimmers on the Olympics? Have those little circles on their backs? It's called cupping. What they do is they're actually manipulating the muscle with cups through the skin. Amazing. Telling you, it works. I love it. Listen, they are amazing. So why don't you learn how they can make you more epic? Because if you want epic relief, epic recovery, and epic results, then go to epicpt.com. That's EPICPT.com. And Linda Craft and Team Realtors. Look, here's the deal. 35 years they have been serving people in the Research Triangle Park community. That's the area called Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. You know them because of the three big universities that surround this area. But Linda Craft and her team have been serving the community, and they've been doing it since 1985. And here's the thing. Their clients, the very first client from 1985, still comes to see her. Why? Well, it's because, as they say, you know what? Her customer service is legendary. It's just absolutely legendary. And the reason why is because Linda started her company in 1985 building one relationship at a time. And 35 years later, you know what? That's still what they do. So if you come into 7300 Six Forks Road there in Raleigh, I can promise you the first thing they're going to do is they're going to say, do you want a bottle of water? Before they even talk about real estate, because they want to connect with you. And they know that even though this may be the largest personal investment that you make in your life, the truth of the matter is your home is where memories are made, and they want to be part of those memories. And, we may forget about the home, but we never will forget those memories. And so why don't you talk to the memory makers? Why don't you talk to Linda Craft and her team, right? And you can learn more by going to lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. And we're back here on A New Direction with Jason Romano. Yes, former producer, ESPN, Jason Romano. He is with us. Live to Forgive, moving forward when those we love hurt us. By the way, I need to say this, Jason. The forward is written by Darryl Strawberry, and I am a little older than you, and I was a Darryl Strawberry fan, even though I was a Yankee fan. I was a Darryl Strawberry fan, and there's a story behind that because I had to.
Well, he played with the Yankees too, so
yeah,
he did. Right?
Yeah, he did. But here's the thing. So my mother's side of the family were Mets fans, and my father's side of the family were Yankees fans.
Oh,
yeah.
Sounds like a divided household.
It was brutal. But I learned how to get the dollar from both grandfathers by naming all the players on both teams, right? So you go over to the house, right, and I could name, Eddie Kranepool and John Stearns and, Felix Millan and John Matlack and Tom Seaver and Cleon Jones, and, right, Rusty Staub, Joe Torre at third. I could go through the whole thing, right? But then I could go over to the other side, Greg Nettles, I could just run, Dwight White. I could just run through the whole thing, and I just got my dollar. That's how you do it. You work both sides. But I really did love Darryl Strawberry, and his, by the way, his forward is absolutely awesome in of itself. I thought it was extraordinarily powerful and just great. And how special for you that both Darryl Strawberry and Doc Gooden, Dwight Gooden, were able to be instrumental in your life and in your father's life, actually, in a very real way. And so I just want to point that out. I want to move us forward because the one thing, there is a theme since college. You go to college, and then what's interesting is you meet your wife, and you're working at the radio station. You try once to get on ESPN, you don't get the job, and then 2 years later you get the job and you're working for ESPN. But there's one theme that happens from college all the way through from your marriage to even being on the air. And that is your dad calls you at night regularly.
Those dreaded phone calls.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, we cannot say, because this show is a clean show, by the way, we cannot say the words that his father used. And by the way, Jason doesn't even write the words out. He lets you know with the first letter what the words were. Let me tell you, they were far from complimentary. How about that?
It's true. Yeah.
And he would manipulate the crap out of you, man. I mean, he would say he's going to kill himself, and then he would say, he would be drunk, and he would, curse and swear at you, and and you went through a variety of emotions.
I did. The phone call that stands out when you bring up phone calls is probably 2003. And again, it involves sports, Jay, right? And it's, right. I'm working at ESPN at the time, and the Cowboys and the Giants are playing on a Monday night. And it's Bill Parcells as the Cowboys coach returning to the Giants. And it's a big game. And, I was working on this show called Game Night on ESPN radio, and we're getting ready to cover the game. And then my dad calls. And I didn't know it's my dad at first because there's no caller ID, and it calls into the main hotline number at ESPN. So I have to answer it for my job. And the last person I'm expecting to hear is my father. And he calls, and I'm thinking, how in the world did you get this number? It's a toll-free number. And maybe that's how he got it from someone. I don't know how he got it, but he got it. And he called, and I answered, and I could tell pretty early on that he was under influence. And I asked him very nicely, though. I said, listen, I can't talk right now. I'm working, which means I have to go back to work. And, I work at a pretty large company that isn't just going to allow me in the middle of a sporting event to stop unless you're literally dying or something's bad and I need to go. And it was bad, but it wasn't that. And so I politely told him, please don't call anymore. At least 3 or 4 more times that night, my dad called. He was drunk. He was angry. His sports team was losing and my sports team was winning. So his way of calling was to scream and yell and make fun of my team because he knew if he did that would get under my skin. And I'm trying to produce a show. I'm trying to get this show going for a national audience on the radio. I have no idea how many thousands of people are listening. Plenty were. And yet I'm dealing with this call from my father. And it kept going. Lo and behold, the Cowboys won the game on this miraculous field goal in overtime that should have never taken place. The Giants should have won the game in regulation. And I found myself in the studio at ESPN while I'm working, cheering openly and loudly that Dallas won. And listen, everybody's allowed to have their teams that they root for at ESPN, but when you're in the middle of work, you try to table those fan the teams that you love. Let's put it that way. The fan side of you table that, and you try to be professional. Well, I was anything but, and I screamed and yelled, "Yes, yes!" And I realized I was screaming and yelling yes because I deep down knew that my dad was upset that the Giants had lost, and he was feeling pain. And it was my way of saying, yes, inflict this pain on this man right now because he's doing these things to me, and I want him to suffer. This is how deranged I was. Lo and behold, 20 minutes later after the game ends, my dad, one last time, calls. And I say, ESPN Radio, this is Jason. That's how I answered the phone. And he's like, hey, Jason, I can't believe your team is the luckiest. And before he could say anything, I laughed as loud as I could for about 10 seconds in his ear. It was 12:30 in the morning. Everybody pretty much at ESPN was gone. And I just started laughing really loud. And I said, I'm so glad your team lost. And click, hung the phone up. I wanted control the relationship with my father. I did not want him to ever get the last word. I did not want him to feel like he had won whatever game we were trying to play. I wanted him to feel pain, and I wanted to have the upper hand on him. And again, this is how sick it was at that time, but this is how angry I was. And I didn't know how to process or deal with a lot of that anger. And the only time my dad and I really communicated was, at least for the most part, I would say 90% of the time, was phone calls, because he lived too far away, and I didn't want him seeing, my daughter, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time with him because of the situation of him drinking. So it was phone calls. And that very thing, that sports thing that should bring us together in a Cowboys-Giants game and have this cool moment with father and son, was just continuing to tear us apart.
But it's, you go through this and you talk about that even though you weren't really proud of your responses, but this is truly the result of pain.
Yes.
Right. I don't want people to miss that a lot of times what happens is our reactions or actions to those who have hurt us, especially those we love who have hurt us.
Yeah.
This is undealt with pain.
It really was. I mean, I was still new in my faith, and my faith plays an important role in this story because I did not grow up as a man who took his faith seriously. And then I became a Christian in 2001 at 26 years old and got very serious about my faith and started to kind of understand what it meant to have a relationship with the Lord, and things like that were beginning to enter into my life, and it was great, but I never dealt with the pain. I didn't know in a healthy way how to do that. I did go to therapy and counseling as a kid, as my 12, 13, 14-year-old, and that helped. Certainly, my mom took us to that, and she almost forced us to go, and I'm glad she did. But as I got older into my 20s and my 30s, this pain was being suppressed, and I really didn't know how to deal with it. My way of dealing with pain was either to store it in a box in the attic and not deal with it, or to lash back out at my father. That was the way of dealing with the pain. And I think if I had sought counseling in those 20s and 30s years, just thinking back now, I probably would have been able to at least function differently and I write in the book, Feeling the Pain, Evaluating the Trauma, and Transforming the Wound. I would have been able to transform this wound, I think, a little differently if I had some counseling or had somebody I could talk to about it from a professional perspective. Unfortunately, I didn't. And faith eventually, and my faith in the Lord, and that journey with God is really what took me to a point to finally forgive him. But it took a long, long time.
Matter of fact, you talk about this intersection basically between your unforgiveness and your dad's drinking. This was an intersection because there was actually kind of a parallel here that you saw between, you said, I always thought I forgave my dad, and I always thought that was the case. But the truth was I really hadn't, I thought what really needed to change was he needed to stop drinking. And you use a C.S. Lewis quote at one point. You said, everyone thinks forgiveness is a lovely idea until he has something to forgive.
Yeah.
Right.
There's another version of that. I think it says everybody can agree that forgiveness is a beautiful idea until we have to practice it.
Yeah, right.
That's a second C.S. Lewis quote on the same topic, and it's basically the same thing. Yeah, I mean, for me, my dad, in those moments as I'm growing and learning about being a Christian, I'm reading about forgiveness. That's like the ultimate sacrifice of Christ going to the cross as a Christian. Like that's the point, right? And that he gets resurrected in a couple days. And that's like the whole idea of Easter and the whole idea of Good Friday and the whole idea of salvation. Forgiveness. God, forgive me for I made a mistake, right? God, forgive me for I have sinned. I have messed up. And then asking God to forgive us and then restore us. But then he also, if anybody grew up in any Catholic church or any other kind of church, they remember the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father. And there's a moment where you say, forgive us our trespasses, God, as we forgive those who trespass against us. So I'm praying this prayer, God, forgive me, and help me forgive those who have hurt me. That was the hard part. And my dad, I could not. See, I thought for many, many years after becoming a Christian that when I allowed my dad back into my life, right? So he calls and he's sober and I talk to him and we have this nice chat about the Celtics or the NFL or something, that I had forgiven him. So yeah, Dad, I've forgiven you because I'm allowing you back into my life. But the second he was drunk, the second he had another drink and he would call and he would lash out again, I would be bitter about this, clearly, and I would scream and yell and inflict that pain back onto him. If that's not as clear as day that I hadn't forgiven him, I don't know what is. Because in Ephesians 4, the Bible, Paul, the apostle, says that we are to forgive as God in Christ forgave us. But the part before that, it actually says that we are to let all bitterness and anger and wrath be put away from us, all of it, along with all malice, if I'm quoting it exactly. And then it says, be kind, tenderhearted, and forgive as God in Christ has forgiven you. So we're supposed to let this anger, we're supposed to put it all away from us. Not let it go per se, but put it away from us and forgive. And I'm thinking, well, how the heck do you do that? How do you forgive someone who's made you so angry and continues to make you angry? But the more I read it, and the more I understood what the Gospels were saying, what Paul was saying in the epistles and the New Testament of the Bible, I'm realizing forgiveness isn't about my dad. Forgiveness is about me and being able to be free from any bitterness and anger and wrath and all the emotions that I was experiencing. So this forgiveness was never about my dad, getting sober and stopping the drinking and getting help or whatever. It was always about me. And when I wasn't forgiving, when I was choosing not to forgive, because I believe it's a choice on both sides, it's like I was entrapped in this anger and this bitterness, and I had these, shackles on my body, and my body was literally inside a cage, and I couldn't get out because I was holding on to this anger and bitterness for so many years. And so, man, that's what I was struggling with. And it took me a very long time, as I said, and it took me till just 7 years ago or so. I was 40 years old when I finally came to a point to forgive my dad because I realized it wasn't about him.
And here we are today. And there's a picture in the back of the book with you and Dad at a Celtics game.
Yeah.
And you're still working through it. I don't want to give away the whole thing because I think people need to read the book. But the relationship is on the mend. And it has been.
Yeah, I call it repair mode. And I think our relationship will be in repair mode for probably the rest of our lives. Forgiveness, when I finally was able to forgive my dad, I've realized it's not this instantaneous moment where you forgive and, you put it in the microwave, you put the time on, and then when it's done, you pull it out and voila, all finished. Like that's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is a process. It's a daily dying to yourself. It's a daily journey to say, hey, I'm going to choose to forgive this man every single time I talk to him or every day, and remember that it's not about him. It helps, as you say, that we were able to reconcile, and I won't give it away. I'll let people, kind of dive in if they want to hear the rest of the story, but we have been able to reconcile. And I want to say one more thing too, Jay. Forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation. I had to make a choice to forgive my dad, whether or not we were able to repair our relationship. And that's something that was really hard. I had to come to a point where, listen, if we never talk again, I have to release this pain and forgive him for all that he did. Thankfully, we were able to kind of spend time in that repairing of our relationship and come to a point now where, like you said, we're working through it, but it's not where it was, thankfully. And, my dad's doing a lot better. And, that's a blessing. It really is.
Jason, I'm going to tell you something. I never have an idea of what the expectations are going to be for a show.
Right.
I just it's always out of my hands. I always tell people it's never in my hands as much as, I like to think it is. I gotta tell you, this show has been far greater than I could have ever hoped or imagined. And I want to thank you personally. First of all, for agreeing to be on the show. So thank you for doing that. Secondly, for writing this powerful book that I believe is going to help so many people all over the world live to forgive, moving forward when those we love hurt us. It's absolutely a phenomenal book. And people need it just to heal. You need to heal you. I mean, you heard him say it there as well. So, Jason, the one thing that I do, and I've kind of pre-warned you about this, is we come to the end of our show because we've been on over an hour together.
Yeah.
And it's been a lot of fun for me. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and so I can't express my gratitude enough. But I told you, I said, the show's called A New Direction because we try to help people find a new direction in their life or their career or their business. And based on live to forgive, moving forward when those we love hurt us, what would be the new direction that Jason Romano would leave with the audience?
I think the new direction, hopefully for all of us, including myself, is that we continue to remind ourselves that, empathy, number one, is a game changer. I think about the world that we're living in right now, and I think about my relationship with my father. And the more empathetic we can be, the more that it will allow us to take ourselves out of the equation in the sense of thinking everything revolves around us. That's a new direction for all of us. I think that we could really take forward steps towards, because I always, for many years with my relationship with my father, thought it was about what he had done to me, not what he was going through. I never cared about what he was going through. I cared about him getting better so that our relationship would be better and that I would not have to deal with what he was doing to me. So it was about me. And with empathy, it's changed. And now I'm looking at him from his perspective and thinking, man, this man was suffering and in a lot of pain for 40 plus years. And when I saw it from his perspective and started to have that empathy, it changed everything. And so my thinking here is a new direction for all of us would be to just have a little more empathy. And I know we've been talking about forgiveness for an hour, but the idea of empathy for me led me to be able to forgive my father. And so I would say let's be more empathetic and let's look towards living a life of empathy wherever it takes us.
I love that. His name is Jason Romano. The book's called Live to Forgive. By the way, he's got a new book coming that just has come out called The Uniform of Leadership. Please, on the blog write-up that I do with the show, I will have links to both books, as a matter of fact, so that you can check out both books, Live to Forgive, as well as The Uniform of Leadership. And I will also have links to Jason's website so that you can reach out to him. Jason is extraordinarily giving when it comes to reaching out to him. I can tell you that firsthand because I'm a nobody, and he For whatever reason, his heart was, I'll do the show. So I am.
Well, we're both nobodies, Jay. How's that? Because I'm a nobody too, brother.
So I do appreciate it. So, folks, you know what? That's the show. You know what I say every week? Be inspired, because when you're inspired, that means you can inspire other people. And when they're inspired, that means in turns they can inspire others as well, and that can make this world an amazing place. I'm going to be back next week with another great guest, another great book, and it's going to be another great show. And as I say to you, everybody, every week, ciao, everybody.
The time has come for a new direction. When you lost your confidence and the answers don't make sense, you got to keep your hope alive. You got to know you can survive. This is your time to fly. A new direction, a brand new day. A new direction, things are gonna change. You can find the strength to go a different way, yeah. The time has come. Your dreams will take you places you have never been before. Find your passion, find your strength. Don't worry anymore. A new direction. A new direction.